It was a late Saturday night in the summer of 2021. In the bustling downtown area of Seattle, Washington, Sarah Jenkins, whose name has been changed, a simple young woman, had just had a fun evening having dinner with some friends. We were at a crowded restaurant, talking, laughing, and enjoying the lively atmosphere of the city at night. Around 11 o'clock, when dinner ended, my friends started leaving one by one. Some had family picking them up. Others shared a ride. I was the only one who needed to call a taxi to get home. We stood at the street corner, under the dim yellow street light. The sidewalk was still quite busy, but the area where we stood was a bit less crowded. The sound of cars, music from nearby bars, and people talking created a symphony of the city at night. I said goodbye to my friends. "I'm calling a taxi," I said, smiling at them. "Be careful, Sarah," my friend Maria said, her voice slightly worried. "It's late. Be careful going home alone." "Got it," I replied. "As soon as the taxi comes, I'll head straight home." They waved goodbye to me and walked towards the parking lot. I stood alone at the street corner, took out my phone, and opened the taxi hailing app. The phone screen showed the map. Locating my position, I entered my home address and pressed the button to call a car. The app said it would take about 10 minutes for the car to arrive. I put my phone in my pocket. Looking around, the night in Seattle was quite cold. With a gentle breeze, I looked up at the sky, full of stars, but the city lights made them appear faint. I stood there, waiting. Time passed slowly. I felt a bit isolated standing alone at the street corner late at night. It had been almost 10 minutes, but still no taxi had arrived. I took out my phone to check the app again. The app still said the car was coming. About 2 more minutes away. I looked out at the street. Cars were still passing by, but not as busy as before. Just then, I suddenly saw a vehicle. A taxi. It was parked on the other side of the street, not far from where I was standing. It was a familiar yellow taxi, but it seemed to be a slightly older model. The taxi was parked in a somewhat strange spot, not at the usual pickup point. It was just parked by the curb, in the shadows. I thought perhaps it was my taxi that had arrived early, or maybe the driver was parked there waiting for a fare. In any case, having a taxi right nearby made me feel a bit relieved. I decided to walk over to that taxi to ask if it was mine, or if they could take me home. I looked across the street. No cars were coming. I carefully stepped off the sidewalk and walked across the street. Late at night in Seattle, some areas were still lively, but on this street corner, everything seemed to be gradually sinking into silence. I didn't know that the yellow taxi parked in the shadows wasn't a normal taxi, and the driver sitting inside wasn't alive. The path leading to the terrifying encounter had just begun to open before my eyes. I walked towards the yellow taxi parked in the shadows on the other side of the street. As I got closer, I saw that the taxi looked older than I had thought. The paint was peeling in a few places, and it looked a bit dirty, as if it hadn't been washed in a long time. The headlights of the taxi were off. There was only the faint light from the street light shining down, enough for me to see the shape of the car and the person sitting inside. As I approached the driver's side window, I looked inside. The driver was sitting in the driver's seat, motionless. He wore an old baseball cap that covered most of his face. I lightly tapped on the window. "Excuse me, is this taxi available?" I asked, my voice a bit soft. No reaction. The driver remained still, not moving. I tapped a little harder. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you available?" Still no reaction. A sense of unease began to creep into me. Why was the driver sitting so still? Was he asleep? Or was something wrong? I leaned down a bit, trying to see the driver's face more clearly under the cap. The faint light shone in, and I saw his face. A gaunt, bony face, with skin that looked strangely pale under the streetlight. But the most terrifying thing was his eyes. His eyes were wide open, looking straight ahead, but they had no color. They were two deep black holes, as if they had absorbed all the light around them. Dark, hollow eyes, no pupils, no whites, just two deep, empty black holes. I froze in terror. My heart pounded in my chest. That face, those eyes, they weren't human. It was the face of a ghost. He sat there, motionless, with his dark, hollow eyes staring straight ahead, not reacting at all to my presence. A sudden bone-chilling cold draft radiated from inside the taxi, piercing through the window pane, engulfing me. The cold was very different, very deep, as if it penetrated my bones. It wasn't the normal cold of the night. I felt as if I was standing next to a frozen tomb. The darkness in the cabin of the old taxi held something evil. That driver wasn't a normal taxi driver. He was a ghost, and he was right in front of me, with dark, hollow eyes staring into nothingness. I knew I had made a serious mistake by approaching this taxi. The cold from within its cabin was a warning. I stood there, in front of the old taxi's window, staring intently at the dark, hollow eyes of the ghost driver. Utter fear had frozen me in place. My body trembled uncontrollably. Those dark, hollow eyes weren't looking at me, they were looking straight ahead, into nothingness. But I felt as if they were seeing through everything. Seeing through time, seeing into something horrifying. An eerie silence enveloped that moment, broken only by the pounding of my heart in my chest and the gentle sound of the wind. I tried to step back, tried to escape the biting cold radiating from the taxi, tried to escape the lifeless gaze of the ghost driver. But I couldn't move, as if some invisible force was holding my feet in place. I was fixated on those dark, hollow eyes, and I felt as if I was being sucked into them, pulled into a bottomless abyss of darkness and emptiness. Then, something more terrifying happened. The dark, hollow eyes of the ghost driver slowly turned to look straight at me. In that moment, the world seemed to stop. I looked straight into those dark, hollow eyes, and I saw nothing. Only absolute emptiness, endless darkness. But I also saw the coldness, the loneliness, and a simmering anger hidden within them. I felt as if his spirit was looking straight into my soul, assessing me, deciding something. A faint whisper echoed in my mind, not through my ears, but directly in my thoughts. Come with me. You belong somewhere else. Help me. The whisper was cold and emotionless, but it carried a strange urgency, as if wanting to pull me into the taxi, into his world. I let out a horrified gasp. The scream was choked in my throat. I stepped back abruptly, stumbled, and fell onto the sidewalk. I couldn't stand that gaze. Those whispers. I crawled backward on the sidewalk, keeping a safe distance from the terrifying taxi. The ghost driver was still sitting there, in the dark cabin, with his dark, hollow eyes looking straight at me. He didn't move, but I felt as if his gaze was following me. The most terrifying moment had occurred. I had looked straight into the eyes of a ghost, and he had looked back at me. The old yellow taxi, parked in the shadows, was no longer a normal vehicle. It was a death trap, driven by a lost soul. I knew I had to run. Immediately, his dark, hollow gaze, the cold from inside the taxi, and the whispers in my mind, all were proof that I was facing something evil. I lay on the sidewalk, staring intently at the dark, hollow eyes of the ghost taxi driver. Utter fear made it almost impossible to breathe. My body trembled uncontrollably. He was still sitting there, in the dark cabin, motionless, but I felt as if he was waiting for me to do something. The biting cold radiating from the taxi grew stronger, as if wanting to freeze the air around me. I knew I had to get out of here. Immediately, I used all my remaining strength. Staggering to my feet, I didn't dare turn my back on the taxi. I slowly backed away, keeping a safe distance from the terrifying vehicle. His dark, hollow eyes were still fixed on me. I felt as if I was being scrutinized, judged by something that wasn't human. As I backed away a few steps, I suddenly heard a faint sound from the taxi. A sound like old leather seats creaking, very softly. Then, I saw the ghost driver's fingers slowly move on the steering wheel. Very slowly, very unnaturally. He wasn't looking at the steering wheel. His dark, hollow eyes were still looking straight at me. A terrifying feeling surged within me. He was preparing to drive? What did he want? Did he want to chase me? Fear completely consumed me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned around and started running. Running as fast as I could. Without thinking, just running. I ran down the sidewalk, rushing into the darkness of the night. The sound of my shoes pounded against the concrete, echoing in the silence of the night. I didn't dare to turn my head to look. I was afraid that if I turned around, I would see the yellow taxi gliding silently behind me, with his dark, hollow eyes looking straight at me. I ran like crazy, trying to escape that terrifying street corner. Escape the haunted taxi. I ran through deserted streets, trying to find lights, find people. The wind whistled past my ears. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt as if someone was following me. The feeling of being watched was very strong, like a cold draft clinging to me. I didn't know if the taxi was chasing me or not, but the fear in my mind told me it was. I ran until my lungs burned. My legs ached. I ran until I had no strength left. I rushed into a more brightly lit area, where a few bars were still open. I plunged into the crowd, trying to blend in, hoping the presence of many people would ward off whatever evil thing was following me. I quickly turned my head, looking back the way I had come. Nothing was there. No yellow taxi. No terrifying figure. Just the normal street of Seattle late at night. But I knew what I had seen was real. The escape from the haunted taxi was real. The fear was still there, persistent. I had run in panic, escaping the dark, hollow gaze from the mysterious taxi. But I didn't know if I had truly escaped it. I escaped the haunted taxi that night, but the fear did not. The image of the ghost driver with the dark, hollow eyes haunted me constantly, both in my dreams and when I was awake. I didn't dare to walk alone at night anymore. Every time I saw a yellow taxi parked on the side of the road, I would feel a shiver and try to stay away from it. I tried to tell a few close friends about what had happened, but they were all skeptical. They said I must have been hallucinating due to being tired and scared being alone late at night. I knew they didn't believe me, but I knew what I had seen was real. The haunting from the yellow taxi stayed with me. I felt as if I was being watched, even when I was inside my house. Occasionally, at night, when I was in my room, I would suddenly feel a cold draft engulf me, just like the cold I had felt from inside the taxi that night. And sometimes, for a brief moment, I would see the image of those dark, hollow eyes in my mind, as if he was somewhere nearby, staring at me. I didn't know why he had appeared that night, why he was there, and why he seemed to be targeting me. Perhaps He was the spirit of a taxi driver who had died tragically. Or perhaps, he was something else, some evil entity residing in the taxi? I researched ghost stories related to taxis and transportation. There are many urban legends about haunted taxis. Drivers who are spirits or demons. Those stories only increased my fear. I knew that yellow taxi was not a normal story. It was something supernatural, something evil. I felt as if I was living in a never-ending nightmare. The fear of the ghost taxi driver was always present. I tried to avoid going out at night, avoid deserted areas, and stay away from yellow taxis. But no matter how hard I tried, the image of those dark, hollow eyes haunted me. I knew I had escaped the taxi that night, but I wasn't sure if I had escaped its haunting. It seemed the ghost taxi driver was still out there somewhere, gliding in the darkness of the city, waiting for the next victim. The haunting from the yellow taxi was a terrifying reminder of the fragility of the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The terrifying encounter with the ghost taxi driver changed my life forever. The fear and the haunting memory of those dark, hollow eyes never disappeared. It became a part of my daily life. I lived in constant vigilance. Every strange noise at night made me jump. Every time I saw the headlights of a car from a distance, I would feel a shiver. I tried to find out more about strange incidents involving taxis or mysteriously missing drivers in Seattle and the surrounding area. I searched old news articles, online forums, and YouTube channels specializing in true horror stories. I found a few notable stories about reports of old taxis appearing mysteriously late at night, parked in deserted areas, about passengers who had gotten into those taxis and were never seen again. One story in particular caught my attention, about a taxi driver who had mysteriously disappeared many years ago, and his taxi was found abandoned in a secluded location. These stories sent shivers down my spine. Perhaps, the ghost taxi driver I had seen was the spirit of one of those drivers, or some spirit that had taken over the taxi. The reason for his appearance and haunting me remained a mystery. Perhaps, I just happened to encounter him that night. Or perhaps, there was a deeper reason that I didn't know. My fear didn't lessen over time. It just transformed. From the fear of a direct attack, it turned into the fear of being watched, being haunted. I felt as if the ghost taxi driver was still out there somewhere, gliding in the darkness of the city. And he knew where I was. I always had the feeling that I was being observed, as if someone was following my every step. The endless ride of the ghost taxi driver continues, and I have inadvertently become a part of his story. The image of those dark, hollow eyes, the strange coldness from the taxi, and the feeling of being watched, all will forever haunt me. I know I will never be able to completely forget that night. It left a deep scar on my mind. My story is a warning from the darkness, that even in a familiar urban environment, supernatural and terrifying things can exist. And sometimes, we can accidentally encounter them, just by taking a simple taxi ride. The endless ride of the ghost taxi driver continues, and I am the only survivor carrying that horrifying story. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, or stories based on accounts and unexplained mysteries, like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel to follow our latest videos. We will bring you more terrifying and haunting stories. Thank you for listening.